27 confirmed eliminations in 72 hours. That was the record set by Alexandra Reyes during Operation Phantom Sentinel, though you'll never find it mentioned in any official military documentation. The Joint Special Operations Command called her Specter, not because she remained hidden in the shadows, but because her targets never lived long enough to confirm she existed at all. Now Alexandra tends to 15 acres of rugged land in the Davis Mountains of West Texas, her modest ranch house sitting in a valley with commanding views of every approach. Her calloused hands, tanned from daily work under the harsh Texas sun, betray nothing of their previous life handling custom-built precision rifles in the most dangerous combat zones across the globe. Through her weathered work gloves, no one would suspect those same fingers once adjusted scopes with micrometer precision as she provided overwatch for America's most classified operations. When black SUVs begin circling her property line, the Águilas Negras cartel sees only what they want to see. A solitary woman, an isolated homestead, an easy conquest for their northward expansion. They mistake her heightened vigilance for nervousness, her tactical assessments for fear, her measured responses for uncertainty. Fatal errors that will transform her humble ranch into the most lethal kill zone north of the Rio Grande. They unwittingly trigger the reactivation of an elite special forces unit that officially ceased to exist years ago. A ghost team whose missions remain sealed in classified archives, guarded by the highest levels of military intelligence. The morning sun beat down mercilessly as Alexandra Reyes walked the perimeter fence line of her property, her German shepherd, Ranger, trotting faithfully at her heel. At 42, she maintained the lean athletic build and situational awareness that had kept her alive through deployments most American civilians couldn't even name. Her dark hair, streaked with premature silver, was pulled back in a practical ponytail beneath a worn Texas Rangers baseball cap, a deliberate nod to her current public identity rather than her classified past. Ranger suddenly paused, ears forward, a low growl forming in his throat. Alexandra immediately dropped to one knee, appearing to check the fence line, while her eyes scanned the distant ridge, where a glint of sunlight on metal had momentarily betrayed someone's position. "Good boy," she murmured, scratching behind Ranger's ears while assessing the situation. The reflection came from the same position she'd noticed tire tracks yesterday, too heavy for typical ranch vehicles, the tread pattern matching high-end tactical tires. Someone was conducting reconnaissance on her property. Alexandra continued her patrol with deliberate casualness, careful not to betray her awareness of the observers. Her ranch, purchased under her real name 5 years ago when she transitioned to civilian life, sat at a strategic location in the Davis Mountains. The valley provided the only viable transit corridor for large vehicles between two major highways, a perfect checkpoint for controlling movement through this section of West Texas. Back at her house, Alexandra filled Ranger's water bowl before stepping inside the cool interior. She immediately accessed her hidden security system, checking camera feeds strategically placed across her property. The system, disguised as standard ranch security but built to military specifications, showed exactly what she suspected: a black Suburban parked on Benson Ridge. 2 men with binoculars and a high-resolution camera documenting her property. Her secure satellite phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Marco Vega, her former spotter and now a Border Patrol tactical officer. Águilas Negras activity confirmed. 3 ranches purchased along Highway 17 corridor in past month. 2 refusals followed by accidents. Watch your 6. Alexandra studied topographical maps of the region spread across her kitchen table. The cartel's acquisition pattern was methodical, securing properties along established smuggling routes. Her ranch controlled a critical junction, the perfect choke point for monitoring movement through this section of the mountains. The distinct rumble of approaching vehicles drew her attention. Through polarized windows designed to prevent observation, from outside, Alexandra watched 3 black SUVs slow as they passed her front gate. Not Border Patrol or local sheriff's department. The vehicles lacked official markings, but moved with the purposeful coordination of a professional security. Detail reconnaissance, marking their next target. "Ranger," she said quietly to the alert shepherd, "they don't know who they're dealing with." Alexandra waited until the vehicles disappeared around the bend before making her way to the barn. Inside, past the regular farm equipment and horse tack that maintained her cover as a small-scale rancher, she unlocked a hidden trapdoor beneath the tack room floor. The reinforced cellar had been her first improvement to the property, installed before she'd even moved in her furniture. Paranoia, her VA counselor had called it. Alexandra called it preparation. The cellar contained a carefully maintained arsenal, precision rifles, tactical gear, communications equipment and medical supplies, everything she'd need if her past ever caught up with her. She hadn't anticipated using it against a cartel, but the training was transferable. Threat assessment, target identification, strategic response. The fundamentals remained the same whether you were facing insurgents in Kandahar or cartel enforcers in West Texas. Alexandra activated an additional layer of security protocols, then began a series of secure communications to former teammates scattered across the country. People who had trusted her with their lives in the world's most hostile environments. People who owed her and whom she trusted implicitly. "Jackson, it's Reyes. Remember that favor from Mosul? I'm calling it in." Captain Michael Jackson, former Delta intelligence officer now working for a private security firm in Virginia, didn't hesitate. Location? Davis Mountains. Cartel moving in, establishing distribution route, getting territorial. Threat assessment? Professional. Military-trained enforcers, establishing presence along the corridor. They'll be here within days. A low whistle came through the secure line. Need backup? Might be good to get the old team together. One last operation. You know we're not as young as we used to be, Specter. Alexandra smiled grimly at the use of her old call sign. Neither are they, Bookworm, but we've got something they don't. What's that? We've faced worse and survived. Call the others. I'll send coordinates. By nightfall, Alexandra had established a comprehensive defense plan. She knew the cartel would follow their standard protocol. Intimidation first, then escalating force if met with resistance. They would expect a frightened woman, easily pressured into selling her land. Instead, they would encounter a prepared opposition with intimate knowledge of the terrain and decades of combined special operations experience. The following morning, Alexandra was splitting firewood when a cloud of dust on the approach road announced visitors. She positioned herself carefully, axe in hand, appearing busy with ranch work while maintaining visual coverage of all approaches. Ranger sat alert at her side, trained to appear casual while remaining combat ready. 2 black SUVs pulled up too. A gate. From the lead vehicle emerged a man in his 50s, his expensive ostrich skin boots and tailored Guayabera shirt contrasting with the rugged landscape. His carefully groomed appearance couldn't disguise the hardness in his eyes or the disciplined posture that suggested military training. 4 men exited the second vehicle, positioning themselves with practiced casualness that didn't fool Alexandra for a second. Security detail, armed, attempting to appear non-threatening while establishing tactical position. Alexandra embedded the axe in the chopping block and wiped her hands on her jeans, projecting the image of a rancher interrupted during chores, rather than a combat veteran assessing threat profiles. "Can I help you?" she called, walking toward the gate with measured steps. Ranger followed slightly behind her left side, exactly where he'd been trained to maintain maximum response capability. "Ms. Reyes?" The man smiled, revealing expensive dental work. "Diego Salazar, representing Horizon Investments. Beautiful property you have here." Alexandra rested her hand on Ranger's head, a seemingly casual gesture that actually prepared him for potential commands. "Thank you. What can I do for you, Mr. Salazar?" "I represent a development group interested in acquiring properties in this region. Your ranch has certain features that make it particularly valuable to my clients." Salazar gestured expansively toward the surrounding mountains. "We're prepared to make a very generous offer." Alexandra noted the 2 men who had separated from the group, walking the perimeter of her front yard with feigned interest in her modest landscaping. They were actually establishing sightlines, evaluating defensive positions, cataloging security measures. Ex-military, likely former Mexican special forces, based on their movement patterns and positioning. "Not interested in selling," Alexandra replied simply. "Family land." Salazar's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Perhaps I haven't been clear about the opportunity, Ms. Reyes. We're prepared to offer significantly above market value. 2 million cash, more than generous for a small ranch in this isolated area." Alexandra scratched Ranger behind the ears, buying time to observe the security team's continued assessment of her property. The men by her barn weren't admiring her. Horses, they were checking approaches and potential defensive positions. Advanced team mapping the property for future operations. "Money isn't everything, Mr. Salazar. Some things aren't for sale." The friendly businessman facade cracked slightly. Salazar stepped closer to the gate, lowering his voice. "Ms. Reyes, let me be direct. This region is changing. Progress, you might say. You can benefit from these changes and profit handsomely. Or you might find yourself facing difficulties that make ranch life unsustainable." Alexandra straightened slightly, allowing just a hint of steel to enter her posture, a calculated reveal to let them know she wasn't as intimidated as they expected. "Sounds like a threat, Mr. Salazar." Salazar smoothed his expression, professional mask sliding back into place, simply stating facts. Accidents happen, especially to stubborn landowners who refuse reasonable offers. Equipment failures, livestock problems, access road issues. Running a ranch alone can become challenging. Part 2-1 of Salazar's men called out in rapid Spanish. From near the barn, something about security systems. Alexandra understood perfectly, but gave no indication, letting them believe their assessment was going uncomprehended. Salazar produced a business card from his shirt pocket. "Think about it, Ms. Reyes. The offer stands for 48 hours. After that," he shrugged expressively, "market conditions change. Properties become less valuable when problems arise." Alexandra took the card, noting the fake company name embossed on heavy stock paper. "I'll consider your proposal." "Excellent." Salazar turned to leave, then paused, looking at Ranger with calculated interest. Beautiful dog. Belgian Malinois mixed with German Shepherd. Pure Shepherd, Alexandra corrected, recognizing the implied threat. Cartel enforcers often targeted pets first, a warning that escalated to family members. Impressive animal. Would be a shame if something happened to him. Predators in these mountains, I hear. Salazar's eyes met Alexandra's, the pretense of friendly business dropping momentarily to reveal the cold calculation beneath. Alexandra maintained eye contact, allowing a fraction of her true nature to surface. That would be a serious mistake. Mr. Salazar. Something in her tone, the quiet confidence of someone intimately familiar with violence, caused a flicker of uncertainty to cross Salazar's face. For a brief moment, the facade cracked, genuine surprise registering as he caught a glimpse of something unexpected in the woman he'd presumed to be an easy target. The cartel representatives retreated to their vehicles, attempting to maintain their confident demeanor. Alexandra remained motionless, watching them depart in a cloud of dust, already calculating her next moves. Inside her house, Alexandra activated her full security system. Hidden cameras covering every approach, motion sensors monitoring the perimeter, everything feeding to a command center established in her basement. Her satellite phone buzzed with an incoming call from her nearest neighbor, Sarah Thornton, whose ranch lay 3 miles east. Alexandra, thank God you're home. Did you hear about the Hendersons? What about them? Alexandra asked, toggling between security feeds on her monitors. They're gone, packed up overnight, no warning, nothing. Sarah's voice trembled slightly. This morning I saw men at their place, black SUVs, guys in suits giving orders to workers. Third family this month, Alexandra stated, her mind processing the information with tactical precision. Everyone's saying it's cartel activity. They've been moving up from the border, buying properties along the old smuggling routes. Those who refuse to sell, Sarah trailed off, find themselves facing unfortunate accidents, Alexandra finished, her voice deliberately neutral. The Coleman place burned down last week after David refused their offer. The next day, his wife's truck went off Highway 17. Sheriff called it an accident, but nobody's buying that. Have they approached you yet? Just left, Alexandra confirmed. Jesus, Alexandra, these aren't ordinary criminals. They're organized, well-funded. Sheriff Patterson is trying, but he's outmatched with his small department. Don't worry about me, Alexandra reassured her. I've dealt with worse. Be careful. They'll come for everyone in the valley eventually. After ending the call, Alexandra whistled for Ranger and began methodical preparations. She sent a series of encrypted messages to her former teammates with coordinates, timelines, and equipment requirements. Their responses came quickly: confirmation of travel plans, estimated arrival times, equipment they would bring. Despite years of separation, the team fell back into operational patterns with practiced ease. Alexandra spent the afternoon studying satellite imagery and topographical maps, identifying defensive positions, potential ambush points, and evacuation routes. Her property's natural features provided significant tactical advantages. Elevated positions with clear sight lines, limited approach vectors that could be easily monitored, natural choke points where security could be concentrated. A text from her Border Patrol contact provided additional intelligence. Águilas Negras moving aggressively into Trans-Pecos region. 9 properties acquired in 8 weeks. Watch movement along Western Ridge. Known transit corridor. As evening approached, Alexandra observed another convoy of vehicles passing her property. this time moving slowly off-road along her western boundary. A deliberate show of force meant to be noticed and to provoke fear. Instead, it confirmed her timeline had accelerated. The cartel wasn't waiting 48 hours. They were already preparing for the next phase. She dressed in tactical pants and a fitted, long-sleeve shirt that allowed freedom of movement while concealing a lightweight ballistic vest. Her boots, seemingly ordinary ranch wear, were actually tactical models designed for silent movement over rough terrain. To the untrained eye, she looked like any rancher preparing for evening chores. Only someone with specialized training would recognize the deliberate placement of the knife at her belt, the reinforced tactical watch, or the custom-molded earpiece that appeared to be a standard hearing protection device, but actually connected to her security system. Alexandra moved through her evening routine with deliberate normalcy, aware that her property was likely under observation. She fed her horses, checked fence lines, and performed visible maintenance tasks while continually scanning her surroundings with practiced subtlety. Ranger remained at her side, his own training evident in how he regularly checked their perimeter. While appearing to simply accompany his owner, just after sunset, Alexandra's security system detected the first approaching vehicle, a single SUV moving without lights along her access road. She retreated to her command center, observing through night vision-equipped cameras as 4 men in tactical gear deployed at her property line. Their movement patterns confirmed her assessment: ex-military, likely former special forces, conducting reconnaissance for a future operation. "Establishing observation posts," she murmured to Ranger, who sat alertly beside her chair. "Standard procedure before an assault." The men placed small devices at strategic points around her property perimeter. Motion sensors or listening devices, Alexandra presumed. She made no move to interfere, letting them believe their preparation was going undetected. Better to know where their surveillance was positioned than to alert them to her awareness. Her satellite phone vibrated with an incoming message from Jackson. "Team assembled. ETA 0400. Keller bringing specialized equipment. Rodriguez has intelligence package from border sources." Alexandra sent a brief confirmation, then continued. Monitoring the cartel's reconnaissance team. They completed their circuit of her property after 90 minutes, retreating with the professional discipline that confirmed these weren't ordinary criminals, but trained operators. The cartel was bringing significant resources to bear, which meant her property was even more valuable to their operations than she had initially assessed. Once certain the initial team had departed, Alexandra began a methodical counter-surveillance operation. Moving with the silence and precision that had made her legendary among special operations units, she slipped into the darkness to locate and identify each device they had placed. Rather than disabling them, which would alert the cartel to her capabilities, she noted their positions and specifications, building a complete picture of their surveillance network. The devices were professional-grade, military specification, another indication that the Águilas Negras had significant resources and connections. Alexandra catalogued each one, assessing their capabilities and coverage areas. The pattern confirmed her suspicion. They were preparing for a coordinated assault rather than simple intimidation. By midnight, Alexandra had completed her counter-surveillance operation and returned to her command center. She secured her property, using systems the cartel's reconnaissance hadn't detected, then began preparing detailed briefing materials for her team's arrival. When Jackson, Rodriguez, Keller, and Dixon arrived before dawn, they would need immediate situational awareness and operational plans. Alexandra allowed herself 2 hours of tactical rest, the specialized sleep pattern developed during her years, in Delta Force that allowed for maximum recovery in minimal time. She lay on a cot in her command center, Ranger alert at her side, sleep coming instantly as it had during operations in hostile territory. Her mind processed the day's information, even as her body recovered, preparing for what was to come. At 0300, Alexandra woke instantly, fully alert. She reviewed security feeds, confirming no additional cartel activity during her rest period, then prepared for her team's arrival. Coffee brewed, satellite imagery updated, weapons checked and staged. The distant rumble of approaching vehicles registered on her perimeter sensors at precisely 0347. 4 separate dust signatures approached from different directions, her team using old counter-surveillance techniques to avoid being tracked. Each took a different approach route, converging on her property from points that would be difficult for observers to monitor simultaneously. Jackson's weathered pickup arrived first, followed by Rodriguez in an unmarked Border Patrol vehicle. Keller and Dixon appeared minutes later, their vehicles covered in dust from backroad driving. They gathered in Alexandra's barn, away from potential observation, moving with the quiet efficiency of operators who had worked together through countless missions. 20 years of civilian life seemed to evaporate as they assembled. Jackson, now showing gray at his temples, but still moving with the precise economy of a Tier 1 operator, carried a hard case containing specialized communications equipment. Rodriguez, who had transitioned to Border Patrol intelligence after his military service, brought a comprehensive intelligence package on cartel operations in the region. Keller, the team's weapons specialist, arrived with a collection of custom firearms disguised as hunting equipment. Dixon, their medical expert and demolition specialist, unpacked gear that looked civilian but contained military-grade components. Just like old times, Jackson observed, his voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable confidence of a veteran combat leader. Though usually we had government backing, Dixon added, organizing medical supplies with practiced precision. Keller examined the barn's structure with professional assessment. Nice setup, Reyes. Multiple egress points, good sight lines, defensible positions. The team moved to their prepared positions as dawn broke over the Davis Mountains. Despite years away from combat operations, each member settled into their role with the muscle memory that came from thousands of hours of specialized training and operational experience. Alexandra had positioned Jackson at the northern ridge with the best observation point, covering all likely approach routes. Rodriguez, with his specialized communications equipment, established a monitoring post that could intercept cartel radio traffic. Keller set up in a concealed position that offered optimal firing solutions on the main access road, while Dixon prepared a medical station in the basement and staged his specialized equipment to create diversions if needed. Everyone understand their sectors and response protocols, Alexandra confirmed through their secure communication system. Each team member acknowledged with professional brevity. This wasn't their first operation in hostile territory, though perhaps their last. The familiarity of preparing for combat created a strange calm, the focused readiness that elite operators develop through years of high-risk deployments. Remember, Alexandra added, We're not just defending property. We're preventing this valley from becoming a cartel stronghold. Every family that would be threatened, every community that would be corrupted if they establish a permanent presence here. From his observation post, Jackson reported the first movement. Vehicle convoy forming at the Henderson property. 8 vehicles, heavy personnel complement. Thermal signatures indicate at least 25 individuals. Weapons profile? Alexandra asked, standard cartel package plus. Seeing rifle-class weapons, possibly including mounted equipment on their lead vehicles. These aren't ranch hands. They're preparing for a military-style operation. Alexandra noted the time, earlier than she had anticipated. The cartel was moving with urgency, suggesting her resistance had triggered a more aggressive timeline. They want to resolve this quickly before local law enforcement becomes aware of their increased presence. Sheriff's Department is responding to a fabricated emergency on the other side of the county, Rodriguez reported, monitoring police frequencies. Someone called in a major accident on Highway 118. All units diverted. Clearing the operational area, Keller noted. Professional approach. Alexandra watched through her thermal optics as heat signatures gathered at the Henderson property. Their movements suggested a pre-operation briefing, team leaders receiving final instructions before deployment. The organization and discipline, visible even at this distance, confirmed these weren't ordinary cartel gunmen, but trained operators executing a planned tactical operation. Movement at the staging area, Jackson reported precisely at 0730. Convoy forming up, standard tactical, spacing. Lead vehicle has additional personnel, likely command element. They'll split forces, Alexandra predicted, based on her assessment of the terrain and standard cartel tactics. Main element on the access road, secondary teams attempting to flank from east and west using the dry creek beds. As if confirming her analysis, the convoy divided as it left the Henderson property. 5 vehicles took the main road toward Alexandra's ranch, while 3 others diverted to approach from different angles. Textbook envelopment, Jackson confirmed. They're positioning to cut off potential escape routes while applying direct pressure from the front. Let them commit fully, Alexandra instructed. No engagement until they've entered our primary response zone. The team maintained disciplined silence as the cartel forces approached, each monitoring their assigned sectors through specialized optics. Years of combat experience had taught them the value of patience, allowing opponents to move into prepared kill zones rather than engaging prematurely. Through her command system, Alexandra tracked the approaching vehicles. The lead SUV contained what appeared to be the operation's commander, likely Salazar himself, based on thermal signature and position. The following vehicles carried tactical teams in standard deployment formation. Main element 5 minutes. From outer perimeter, Rodriguez reported. Flanking teams moving into position along eastern and western approaches. Hold positions, Alexandra reminded her team. Let them believe they have tactical surprise. The cartel convoy moved with confidence, vehicles maintaining professional spacing as they approached Alexandra's property. The operators inside, clearly, believed they were executing a straightforward intimidation action against an isolated civilian target. Overwhelming force against minimal resistance. At precisely 0749, the lead vehicle reached Alexandra's outer gate. Rather than stopping, it accelerated through the barrier, demolishing it in a show of force meant to intimidate. The following vehicles entered in tactical formation, spreading out to establish a perimeter around the main house. From his concealed, Position, Jackson observed through his scope as Salazar emerged from the second vehicle, directing his men with hand signals. Target identified. Salazar is personally commanding the operation. 4-man security detail, remaining forces establishing. Perimeter positions. Flanking teams in position, Rodriguez added. Eastern team using the dry creek bed for cover. Western team moving through the mesquite thicket. Alexandra watched through her security feed as cartel operators deployed around her house in textbook formation. They moved with professional discipline, establishing fields of fire and communication lines. Under other circumstances, she might have admired their tactical proficiency. No movement in the house, one operator reported in Spanish, unaware that Alexandra and Rodriguez understood perfectly. Thermal scan shows nothing inside. Salazar grabbed a radio handset. Check the barn and outbuildings. She has to be somewhere. 3. Cartel operators approached the barn, weapons ready in professional stance. Alexandra observed their movement, counting down in her head as they reached the predetermined engagement line. Execute initial response, she commanded calmly. Dixon activated his first sequence, not explosives, but a sophisticated array of disorientation devices. Specialized audio projectors activated simultaneously, broadcasting the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors from multiple directions. At the same time, powerful LED arrays blazed to life, momentarily blinding anyone without eye protection. The disorientation lasted only seconds, but that was all the team needed. Before the cartel operators could recover, Keller took precise shots from his concealed position, not killing his targets, but placing carefully calculated rounds that disabled without fatal injury. "What the hell?" Salazar shouted, diving for cover behind a vehicle. "Where's that coming from? Get a fix on the shooter." The cartel forces responded with professional efficiency despite their surprise, seeking cover and attempting to locate the source of fire. Their training was evident in how quickly they established defensive positions and began coordinated counterfire. But they were shooting at phantoms, unable to locate their actual attackers. 3 operators moving to flank east, Jackson reported, calmly, his rifle cracking in the morning air. "I see them," Alexandra responded, her own weapon tracking the movement. 2 precisely placed shots drove the flanking team directly into Rodriguez's field of fire. "Who are we dealing with?" "A cartel," operators shouted in Spanish over their tactical radio. "These aren't civilians. They're too organized," another responded. "Too precise." Salazar's voice cut through the chaos. "They're professionals. Fall back to vehicles, re-establish defensive formation." From their concealed positions, Alexandra's team maintained disciplined fire, herding the cartel operators exactly where they wanted them, into predetermined zones where overlapping fields of fire left them vulnerable despite their tactical training. "Technical at your 2 o'clock, Jackson called to Alexandra, identifying a specially equipped vehicle with a mounted weapon system. Alexandra sighted the vehicle as its gunner attempted to establish a firing position. Before he could bring his weapon to bear, she placed a precise shot that disabled the vehicle's power system, leaving the heavy weapon useless. "Sheriff's Department responding," Rodriguez reported suddenly. "Multiple units diverted from the false emergency, ETA 7. Minutes. Wrap it up," Alexandra ordered. "Law enforcement approaching. Transition to withdrawal protocol." The team shifted tactics seamlessly, adjusting their fire to channel the remaining cartel forces toward the southern perimeter. Dixon remotely deactivated his remaining devices, while Jackson and Keller performed a coordinated withdrawal from their firing positions, leaving no evidence of their presence. Rodriguez began scrubbing their communications, ensuring no traceable signals remained. By the time Sheriff Patterson's patrol vehicles crested the hill, lights flashing, the situation on Alexandra's ranch had transformed. What remained visible was Alexandra standing alone on her porch, holding a hunting rifle in a defensive position, with several cartel members taking cover behind disabled vehicles. Ms. Reyes... Sheriff Patterson approached cautiously, sidearm drawn as his deputies secured the perimeter. "Are you all right? What happened here?" Alexandra lowered her rifle slightly, projecting the image of a frightened but determined homeowner. "They came to pressure me into selling, got insistent when I refused." She nodded toward Salazar, who sat against a disabled SUV nursing a shoulder wound. "That one threatened to kill my dog if I didn't cooperate." Patterson surveyed the scene with growing bewilderment. Disabled vehicles, wounded cartel members, shell casings scattered across the property. His experienced eye registered details that didn't align with a simple property dispute. "This is more than a disagreement over real estate, Ms. Reyes," Patterson stated quietly, holstering his weapon as his deputies moved to secure the wounded cartel members. Alexandra met his gaze steadily. "Seems straightforward to me, Sheriff. They trespassed, threatened me, drew weapons. Texas law is clear about defending your property." The sheriff lowered his voice, stepping closer to avoid being overheard. "These aren't ordinary criminals. They're Águilas Negras enforcers. This level of response," he gestured to the scene around them, "will bring more trouble. I'll keep that in mind." Patterson studied the tactical positioning of the disabled vehicles, the precise nature of the wounds suffered by the cartel members, the surprising lack of fatal injuries, despite the intensity of the confrontation. "You handle yourself remarkably well for a rancher, Ms. Reyes." Alexandra shrugged with deliberate casualness. "Grew up hunting. My father believed in being prepared." Patterson responded, clearly unconvinced. 16 wounded, no fatalities, coordinated defense that disabled vehicles and neutralized professional operators. That's a lot more than being prepared. Guess I got lucky. The sheriff holstered his weapon, but maintained his scrutiny of Alexandra. "These men will need medical attention before they face charges for trespassing and assault, but their associates won't take this lightly." "I'd suggest maintaining extra patrols near the valley access roads, Sheriff," Alexandra replied, something in her tone making Patterson look at her more carefully. "They'll likely have reinforcements staging nearby." "You seem to know a lot about their tactical approach, Ms. Reyes." "Just thinking practically. It's what I would do." Patterson's radio crackled with a deputy's report that paramedics were arriving. He gave Alexandra one final measuring look before turning to coordinate the scene response. "We'll need a formal statement from you once we've secured these suspects." After the sheriff departed to oversee the processing of the cartel members, Alexandra's team reconvened in her command center, hidden beneath a house where law enforcement wouldn't detect their presence. The first phase of their operation had gone exactly as planned, a measured defensive response that could be plausibly explained as a civilian homeowner protecting her property. 16 in custody, Dixon reported, having monitored the police and medical response, all with non-fatal injuries, stabilized and secure. "They'll be back," Jackson stated with certainty, checking his ammunition supply. "Next time with everything they've got?" Rodriguez monitored communications channels, already intercepting orders. They're calling in reinforcements from across the border. Salazar's superior is furious about the failure of what should have been a routine intimidation operation. Good, Alexandra observed, studying the tactical display. Let them come angry. Angry opponents make even bigger mistakes than scared ones. Sheriff suspicious, Keller noted, cleaning his rifle with methodical precision. He knows this wasn't just a rancher getting lucky with a hunting rifle. Patterson's a good cop, Alexandra agreed, but he's also smart enough to know when not to ask too many questions. He's been fighting cartel encroachment for years with minimal resources and support. He won't interfere with someone effectively pushing back against them. Jackson examined the security feeds, showing law enforcement processing the scene outside. What's phase 2 now that they know what they're dealing with? That's just it, Alexandra explained, her tactical mind already mapping the next engagement. They don't know what they're dealing with. They'll assume we're just well-prepared civilians, maybe veterans with some tactical training. They'll adjust their approach, come harder next time with better surveillance and more firepower. And that's when we show them what an actual Delta team can do, Keller concluded with professional satisfaction. As night fell across the Davis Mountains, the team maintained vigilance while conserving energy for what would come next. Alexandra knew the cartel would not accept this defeat. Their entire operational model depended on demonstrating overwhelming force against any resistance. The leadership would consider this a direct challenge that required decisive response, likely within the next 24 hours. Get some rest, Alexandra advised her team as they monitored the final departure of law enforcement from her property. Next round won't be a warning shot. As the others sought brief moments of tactical sleep, Alexandra stepped outside, scanning the distant ridgelines where she knew cartel observers would be watching. The night vision equipment they would be using couldn't detect her own specialized optics as she studied their positions, counting 4 observation posts already established around her property. Let them watch. Let them plan. Let them think they understood what had happened today. The real battle was yet to come. 100 miles south, in a heavily guarded compound outside Ojinaga, Victor Castellanos slammed his fist against a polished mahogany desk. The Águilas Negras operations director had just received Salazar's failure report. 16 men captured by a single woman defending her ranch. His voice remained controlled, but carried an unmistakable deadliness that made everyone in the room stand straighter. Explain to me how an entire tactical team was disabled by one civilian. Miguel Ortiz, Salazar's second-in-command who had managed to escape the debacle, stood rigidly before him. Not just a civilian, sir. The property was prepared with sophisticated defensive measures, coordinated response, precision fire discipline. She had assistants, trained personnel, possibly former military contractors. And nobody thought to gather proper intelligence before sending in a strike team? Castellanos examined satellite photographs of Alexandra's ranch spread across his desk. Who is she? Alexandra Reyes, age 42. Purchased the property 5 years ago. No criminal record, no known connections to law enforcement or security services. Ortiz hesitated before continuing. Her background shows 4 years as an Army logistics officer, honorable discharge. Nothing remarkable on paper. Yet she disabled 16 of our best men without killing any of them, Castellanos observed, his finger tapping a topographical map of the valley. Those aren't the tactics of a logistics officer. There are inconsistencies in her history, sir. Periods where her documentation exists, but details are sparse. Tax records without corresponding employment history. International travel that doesn't match her supposed occupation. Castellanos studied the property layout, his eyes narrowing as he assessed its tactical significance. She knew Salazar's name without introduction during their first meeting. She anticipated our standard approach vectors. She disabled vehicles with precision shots to mechanical systems rather than personnel. We've been compromised, Ortiz suggested. Local law enforcement has our men in custody. Salazar will maintain silence, Castellanos stated with absolute certainty. The unspoken truth, that failure would result in consequences to Salazar's family, hung in the air between them. But he has failed me, and that cannot stand. His finger traced the access routes to Alexandra's ranch. This property controls the only viable transit corridor between Highway 17 and A, our primary distribution route into 3 states. Without it, we lose our advantage over Los Zetas in the Northern Territories. Ortiz shifted uncomfortably. What are your orders, sir? Prepare our special operations team. I want this resolved within 36 hours. Castellanos' voice carried the finality of a death sentence. No more businessmen pretense, no more measured approaches. And the woman? Ortiz asked. Bring her to me. I want to know who we're really dealing with before she's eliminated. As dawn broke over the Davis Mountains, Alexandra's team gathered in the kitchen to review their intelligence and finalize their strategy. Rodriguez had spent the night monitoring cartel communications and coordinating with his border patrol contacts. Sheriff's got the prisoners at county lockup, he reported. DEA is sending agents to interview them, expected arrival this afternoon. Jackson poured coffee with the efficient movements of someone accustomed to operating on minimal sleep. How? Long before they talk. Salazar won't, Alexandra assessed confidently. His type values loyalty over self-preservation. But some of the younger operators might be looking for deals, especially facing federal charges on U.S. soil. Dixon entered from outside, having completed a perimeter check in the pre-dawn darkness. Found evidence of observation posts on all. Ridgelines surrounding the property. 2-man teams, professional field craft. They withdrew after the sheriff's department arrived, but they documented the entire engagement. Alexandra nodded, unsurprised. Good. Let them think they understand what happened. A rancher with some veteran friends who got lucky against their B-team enforcers. Meanwhile, Rodriguez added, reviewing intercepted communications. They've called in their special operations unit from Ojinaga. Thermal satellite imagery shows increased activity at a known Águilas Negras forward operating base near the border. At least 20 operators, former Mexican Naval Special Forces, preparing for deployment. Timeline? Alexandra asked, studying the map. Tonight, most likely. They're moving specialized equipment across the border. Thermal optics, encrypted communications, gear, heavy weapons. These aren't standard cartel gunmen. They're their elite direct action team. Keller examined their defensive preparations with a sniper's methodical attention to detail. They won't attempt another frontal assault after yesterday. They'll use darkness, multiple entry points, coordinated teams, probably try to take you alive, Reyes. Castellanos will want answers before he eliminates a threat, Alexandra agreed, naming the cartel operations director she had identified through intelligence analysis. That gives us an advantage. They'll be using capture techniques rather than straight elimination protocols. Part 5. The soft vibration of Alexandra's secure phone interrupted their planning session. The caller ID showed Sheriff Patterson's office. She activated the speaker function so her team could monitor the conversation. Ms. Reyes, Sheriff Patterson here. Got a minute to talk? Of course, Sheriff. How can I help you? Those men we took into custody yesterday, Patterson's voice carried an edge of concern. DEA's taken jurisdiction, which is standard procedure when cartel members are involved, but something odd is happening with the federal response. Alexandra exchanged glances with her team. What kind of odd? 2 different federal task forces have shown interest. One standard DEA border operations. I know those agents, worked with them for years. The other, Patterson hesitated. Different agency, credentials check out, but I've never seen them in this jurisdiction before. They're asking specific questions about you and your property. What kind of questions? Alexandra kept her voice neutral while Rodriguez immediately began accessing federal law enforcement databases through his secure Border Patrol connections. Your military service record, property purchase history, known associates. They seem more interested in you than the cartel members we apprehended. Alexandra, process this information quickly, considering possible implications. Anything else unusual? They've set up a command post at the Sierra Vista Motel rather than working from our station or the DEA field office in El Paso, keeping separate from regular federal operations. I appreciate the heads up, Sheriff. One more thing, Patterson added. I ran your service record after yesterday's incident. Logistics officer with a standard 4-year commitment. Nothing that explains how you neutralized a professional cartel tactical team. The unasked question hung in the air between them. Some people are just naturally good in a crisis, Sheriff. Alexandra maintained her cover story. Patterson clearly wasn't convinced. Whatever your background really is, Ms. Reyes, you should know the cartel isn't your only concern now. Something about yesterday's incident has attracted serious attention. After ending the call, Alexandra turned to Rodriguez, who was already providing answers. Got it, he confirmed, reviewing data on his secure tablet. Second Federal Team is operating under Department of Homeland Security credentials, but they're not standard DHS, cross-referencing their identification codes against my Border Patrol. Database shows inconsistencies. Meaning, Jackson asked, they're either using sophisticated false credentials or they're from a compartmentalized unit that operates outside normal federal structures. Alexandra considered the implications. Intelligence community, someone's connecting dots. Keller looked up from his weapon maintenance. Your former unit checking on you? Possible, but unlikely, Alexandra replied. My separation was clean, all operations properly closed. More likely, someone noticed the tactical signature of yesterday's engagement and flagged it for review. Professional operators can recognize each other's work. Complicates our timeline, Jackson observed. We need to resolve the cartel situation before these federal observers become active participants. Alexandra nodded in agreement. Rodriguez, can you access the DHS team's secure communications? He shook his head. Not without specialized equipment. They're using encryption protocols beyond my access level. Then we proceed as planned, but accelerate our timeline. The cartel special. Operations team will move tonight, and we need to be ready before these federal observers can interfere. The team spent the next few hours enhancing their defensive preparations. unlike the previous day's engagement, designed to appear as a civilian defense that could be explained to law enforcement. Tonight, they would implement full counter-offensive measures against professional operators. Dixon installed specialized sensors along all potential approach routes, while Keller established secondary firing positions with pre-calculated engagement zones. Jackson prepared communication jamming equipment that would isolate the cartel teams from their command structure, and Rodriguez set up a tactical operations center in Alexandra's basement that could monitor all activity on the property. At midday, Alexandra's security system detected a government-issued SUV approaching her main gate. The vehicle's markings identified it as Department of Homeland Security, matching the credentials Rodriguez had flagged as suspicious. Federal observers making direct contact, Jackson noted from his monitoring position. Earlier than expected. Maintain your preparations, Alexandra instructed the team. I'll handle this. She positioned herself on the porch, Ranger at her side, presenting the image of a ranch owner recovering from yesterday's confrontation. The property showed visible signs of the engagement. Damaged gate, tire tracks across her front yard, empty. Shell casings that had been deliberately left visible for law enforcement documentation. Two men in professional attire exited the vehicle. Their movements betrayed specialized training despite their civilian appearance. The careful scanning of surroundings, positioning that gave them optimal visibility while maintaining defensive posture. The subtle coordination that suggested partnership in high-risk environments. Ms. Reyes, the lead agent called, displaying credentials as he approached. Special Agent Thomas Warren, Department of Homeland Security. This is Special Agent Carson. We'd like to ask you a few questions about yesterday's incident. Alexandra analyzed their approach, noting details that confirmed Rodriguez's assessment. These weren't standard DHS agents. Their tactical awareness, equipment quality, and the subtle earpieces they wore suggested a specialized unit operating under DHS cover. Sheriff Patterson already took my statement, she replied, maintaining the role of a cooperative civilian. We're conducting a separate investigation, Warren explained, his eyes constantly scanning the property with professional assessment. The cartel members who attacked your ranch are connected to a larger national security matter. Alexandra gestured toward two chairs on her porch. Happy to help however I can. As the agent sat, she noted their positioning, maintaining clear sightlines to all approaches, never fully relaxing their vigilance. Agent Carson placed his tablet on the table between them, activating what appeared to be a standard recording application, but which Alexandra recognized as a sophisticated voice analysis program used by intelligence services. Ms. Reyes, your military service record shows 4 years as an Army logistics officer, discharged honorably in 2007. Is that correct? Warren began with what appeared to be basic background questions. That's right, Alexandra confirmed, recognizing the standard intelligence approach. Begin with verifiable information to establish a baseline before moving to areas of real interest. And you purchased this property 5 years ago? Yes, after. Working various security consulting jobs. Always wanted my own place in the mountains. Carson scrolled through his tablet. Interesting choice of location. Your property sits at a strategic junction, controlling access to the entire Northern Valley. Almost like you selected it for its tactical advantages. Alexandra maintained a neutral expression. I like the views and the privacy. Most ranchers prefer isolation. Warren leaned forward slightly. Ms. Reyes, yesterday you engaged and neutralized 16 cartel operators without a single fatality. Sheriff Patterson's report indicates precision shooting that disabled vehicles and wounded attackers in non-lethal areas, suggesting advanced tactical training beyond standard military qualification. I competed in shooting sports after leaving the service. Alexandra offered the prepared explanation. Helps keep my skills sharp for hunting season. Carson's expression showed professional skepticism. Competitive shooting doesn't typically include tactical engagement against multiple armed opponents using military-style assault formations. When you're defending your life and home, you'd be surprised what you're capable of, Alexandra replied calmly. Warren studied her with the measured assessment of someone who had conducted countless interrogations. Witnesses reported hearing what sounded like coordinated fire from multiple positions, yet Sheriff Patterson found only your weapons had been discharged according to residue testing. Alexandra recognized the intelligence technique, present inconsistencies to prompt explanations that might reveal additional information. Sound echoes strangely in these valleys, Agent Warren. Creates the impression of multiple shooters. Ms. Reyes, Warren continued, changing approach, we believe the Águilas Negras targeted your property specifically because of its strategic value for their cross-border operations. Their approach yesterday wasn't standard intimidation, it was a tactical operation led by former military personnel. That would explain why they seemed so professional, Alexandra acknowledged, giving them information they already knew while revealing nothing about her own background. Carson activated a satellite image on his tablet, showing thermal signatures of the previous day's engagement. Our analysis indicates defensive positions here, here, and here. He highlighted areas where her team had operated. Precision fields of fire, overlapping coverage zones, professional containment tactics, not typical of a civilian ranch defense. Alexandra recognized the gentle but persistent pressure of a professional intelligence assessment. These agents were methodically eliminating possibilities, narrowing toward conclusions about her true capabilities and background. Agent Warren, I defended my property against armed intruders, as is my right under Texas law. Beyond that, I'm not sure what you're suggesting. Warren exchanged a glance with his partner before continuing. We're not here about yesterday's defense. Ms. Reyes, we're here because our analysis suggests you have specialized training consistent with certain elite military units. Training that could be valuable to ongoing national security operations against transnational criminal organizations. The true purpose of their visit became clear. They weren't investigating the incident. They were assessing her potential as an intelligence asset. I believe you've mistaken me for someone else, Agent Warren. I'm just a rancher trying to protect my property. Warren handed her a business card with only a name and phone number. When the cartel returns tonight, and our intelligence confirms, you might find yourself needing assistance that the local sheriff can't provide. This number connects to resources that can respond appropriately to the level of threat you're facing. Alexandra took the card, noting the absence of agency identification or official government markings. Another indicator this wasn't standard DHS procedure. What makes you think they'll be back tonight? She asked, probing for information about their intelligence sources. The Águilas Negras Special Operations Team crossed the border 3 hours ago, Carson stated matter-of-factly. 22 operators with advanced equipment. They're staging at a forward position 30 miles southwest of here. The specificity of their intelligence was telling. These agents had access to real-time surveillance capabilities beyond standard law enforcement. Alexandra carefully maintained her civilian persona despite the implications. I appreciate the warning. As the agents prepared to leave, Warren paused. Ms. Reyes, whatever your background truly is, you should know the cartel unit coming tonight is composed of former Mexican Naval Infantry Special Forces. They've conducted over 30 high-value target extractions in the past 3 years. They're not coming to intimidate you, they're coming to take you. I'll keep that in mind. That number I gave you, Warren gestured to the card. I suggest using it before they arrive. Some situations require specialized government resources. After the federal agents departed, Alexandra returned to her team in the command center. She shared the details of the conversation while Rodriguez attempted to identify the agents through his Border Patrol connections. They're definitely intelligence community, he confirmed after running their credentials through restricted databases. Operating under DHS cover, but their authorization codes don't match any standard federal task force. CIA domestic operations, Jackson suggested. Possibly, Alexandra considered, or a specialized counterterrorism unit monitoring cartel activities. Either way, they know what's coming tonight, and they're interested enough in our capabilities. To make direct contact, should we abort? Keller asked, ever the pragmatic operator. If we've attracted federal attention, the situation is already compromised. Alexandria studied the tactical display showing cartel movements her team had been tracking. No, their approach wasn't threatening. They were assessing, not preparing enforcement action, and they offered assistance rather than demanding we stand down. They're recruiting, Jackson concluded, identified our capabilities, and want to bring us into whatever operation they're running against the cartel. Which means they'll likely maintain surveillance but won't interfere unless the situation deteriorates beyond our control, Alexandra determined. We proceed as planned, but with additional counter-surveillance measures against both cartel and federal observation. Part 6A's dusk approached. Alexandra's team made final preparations for the night's inevitable confrontation. Their defensive strategy had been adjusted to account for both the cartel's expected tactics and the complication of federal observers monitoring the situation. Thermal imaging shows increased activity at their staging area, Rodriguez reported from the command center. 3 tactical teams forming up, vehicle preparations consistent with imminent deployment. Jackson finalized communications protocols, implementing additional encryption and frequency hopping measures to prevent interception. If these federal observers are as sophisticated as we suspect, they'll be monitoring all standard channels. We need to stay completely off conventional frequencies. Keller returned from positioning additional countermeasures along likely approach routes. Motion sensors and infrared triggers set at all entry points. They'll need specialized equipment to avoid detection, which they'll have, Alexandra reminded him. These aren't cartel foot soldiers. They're specialized operators with military-grade equipment. Assume they can detect and bypass standard security measures. The team conducted final equipment checks as the last light faded from the western sky. Unlike their previous engagement, configured to appear as civilian self-defense, tonight they prepared for asymmetric warfare against professional opponents. Each team member carried specialized equipment specifically designed for counter-cartel operations. lightweight body armor, encrypted communication devices, and weapons selected for reliability in adverse conditions. Alexandra studied satellite imagery of the surrounding terrain, identifying the most probable infiltration routes. They'll approach under cover of darkness, using 3 or 4 dispersed teams to establish a perimeter before the main assault force moves in. Standard special operations doctrine for high-value target extraction. And the federal observers, Dixon asked, preparing medical supplies and tactical diversionary devices. 2 surveillance positions established, Rodriguez confirmed, monitoring. Thermal signatures on ridgelines surrounding the property, northeast ridge and western approach. Minimal personnel, likely using remote observation equipment rather than direct visual surveillance. Alexandra made her final decision. We let the cartel teams fully commit before engaging. The federal observers likely won't intervene unless the situation threatens to spill beyond the property or civilian lives are directly endangered. As full darkness enveloped the Davis Mountains, the team moved to their pre-designated positions. Unlike conventional military operations, with overwhelming force and support elements, they would rely on superior tactical knowledge, intimate familiarity with the terrain, and the precision that came from years of special operations experience. Movement detected at the southern perimeter. Rodriguez's voice came through their secure communications. 3 vehicle convoy approaching without lights, standard tactical spacing. Hold positions, Alexandra instructed. Let them deploy fully before we reveal our defensive capabilities. Through her thermal optics, Alexandra observed the cartel convoy halt 1 kilometer from her property. Professional discipline was evident in how they established a forward command post, vehicles positioned for optimal coverage, personnel deploying. In practiced formations, equipment being distributed with tactical efficiency. They're splitting into 4 elements, Jackson reported from his observation position. Standard diamond pattern. 3 teams establishing perimeter control points while the main element prepares for central approach. Alexandra watched as the cartel operators dispersed into the darkness, their thermal signatures dividing into coordinated teams moving toward predetermined positions around her property. Their movement patterns confirmed Rodriguez's intelligence. These weren't standard cartel gunmen, but specialized operators with professional military training. Alpha team moving through the eastern arroyo, Rodriguez tracked. Beta team taking the western ridge. Gamma establishing blocking position to the north. Main strike element holding at vehicles, likely waiting for perimeter confirmation. Classic envelope and constrict, Alexandra noted. They want to eliminate all potential escape routes before the primary team moves in. The team maintained disciplined silence as the cartel operators methodically established their positions. Years of special operations experience had taught them the value of patience, allowing opponents to commit fully to their plan before disrupting it at the most vulnerable moment. From his hidden position, Keller observed through his advanced optics as the Alpha team reached the eastern perimeter of Alexandra's property. Alpha element in position. 4 operators, tactical spacing, advanced night vision equipment, designated marksman identified by weapon profile. Beta team has reached western approach, Jackson confirmed. Similar configuration, but with what appears to be breaching equipment. They're preparing for structural entry. Alexandra monitored the deployment with professional assessment. The cartel teams moved with precision that indicated extensive training and operational experience. Their approach incorporated terrain features for concealment, maintained proper intervals to minimize exposure, and established overlapping fields of fire, all hallmarks of specialized military units rather than criminal enforcers. Perimeter teams in final positions, Rodriguez reported after 20 minutes of careful observation. Main element beginning their approach. 8 operators in staggered formation, heavy weapons support. Command element identified. Jackson added. 2 figures maintaining position at vehicles, directing operations via secure communications. One matches Ortiz's thermal profile from yesterday's engagement. Alexandra made her final calculation as the cartel teams completed their deployment. With all elements committed to their assault positions, they had unwittingly entered precisely the engagement zone she had prepared. "Initiate countermeasures," she commanded calmly. Dixon activated the first sequence of his specialized equipment, not explosive devices or direct weapons, but a sophisticated electronic warfare package designed to disrupt enemy coordination. Targeted electromagnetic pulses disabled the cartel's night vision systems, communication equipment, and tactical coordination capabilities simultaneously. The effect was immediate and devastating. The carefully coordinated cartel operation dissolved into confusion as operators suddenly found themselves without communication links or enhanced vision capabilities. Vulnerable in unfamiliar terrain they had been navigating with technological assistance. "Alpha team disoriented," Keller reported, his voice maintaining the professional calm of a veteran operator. "Attempting to establish visual contact without electronic aids. Beta team has halted advance, assuming defensive posture," Jackson confirmed. "Standard contingency response to communications failure." Before the cartel teams could recover, Alexandra's team executed the second phase of their counter-operation. Precisely aimed suppressive fire from multiple positions further disrupted the cartel's attempts to regroup, driving them toward pre-designated containment zones where their movement options became increasingly limited. "What's happening?" a cartel operator shouted in Spanish, the professional discipline cracking under unexpected pressure. "Comms are down. I've lost contact with command." "Fall back to rally point 3. Another voice called, attempting to implement contingency protocols. Alexandra monitored the chaos through her thermal imaging system, directing her team's coordinated response. Keller, contain Alpha team's withdrawal. Jackson, prevent Beta from linking with main element. Dixon, prepare secondary countermeasures for deployment when they attempt to regroup. The cartel operators, despite their training, found themselves in a tactical nightmare. Unable to communicate effectively, denied their technological advantages, and facing precisely directed fire from opponents who remained invisible in the darkness. Their attempted withdrawal toward rally points became increasingly disorganized as Alexandra's team methodically eliminated their tactical options. From his command position at the vehicles, Miguel Ortiz recognized the systematic dismantling of his operation. Unlike yesterday's engagement, which could have been attributed to fortunate civilian resistance, tonight's counter-operation demonstrated unmistakable professional military doctrine, the methodical isolation and neutralization of component elements to prevent coordinated response. "Who are these people?" his tactical advisor asked, witnessing their special operations team being systematically outmaneuvered by unseen opponents. Ortiz's expression hardened with growing realization. Not civilian ranch defenders, we're facing experienced military operators. At the Federal Observation Post on the Northeast Ridge, Agents Warren and Carson monitored the engagement through specialized surveillance equipment. Unlike standard law enforcement observation gear, their systems could track thermal signatures, intercept communications, and provide real-time tactical assessment of the unfolding operation. Textbook counterinsurgency tactics, Warren noted with professional appreciation. Systematic disruption of command and control capabilities followed by isolation of component elements. Carson logged telemetry data from the engagement. Precision, fire discipline, non-standard electronic countermeasures, coordinated multi-point suppression. Definitely former special operations, likely Tier 1 unit based on the tactical signature. Warren activated a secure satellite communication link. Control, this is Observer 1. Confirmed tactical profile consistent with target assessment. Reyes and associates demonstrating capabilities consistent with Delta operators. Recommend elevation to Priority Alpha for recruitment following resolution of current engagement. At Alexandra's command center, Rodriguez intercepted and decoded the federal transmission. Federal observers are definitely intelligence community, not law enforcement. They're assessing our capabilities rather than preparing to intervene. Good, Alexandra responded. Maintain focus on the cartel threat. We can address the federal interest once the immediate situation is resolved. On her thermal display, Alexandra observed the cartel's main strike element, attempting to regroup after their initial confusion. Despite the electronic countermeasures, their professional training was evident in how they established a defensive perimeter and began systematic assessment of their situation. Main element adapting, she noted with professional respect, transitioning to non-electronic coordination, implementing visual signaling protocols. These aren't amateurs, Jackson confirmed. They're falling back to basic special operations training when technology fails. Alexandra adjusted her strategy accordingly. Dixon, implement acoustic disorientation measures. Keller and Jackson, prepare for coordinated engagement from secondary positions. Dixon activated his specialized audio projection system, broadcasting precisely calibrated sound patterns designed to create disorientation and confusion. Unlike simple noise distractions, these sophisticated acoustic countermeasures generated overlapping frequency patterns that disrupted the brain's ability to process auditory information or determine sound origins. The effect further degraded the cartel team's coordination capabilities, forcing them to rely on individual action rather than coordinated response. Alexandra's team capitalized on this advantage, engaging from carefully prepared positions that provided optimal firing solutions, while maintaining their own concealment. Target vehicle power systems and communication equipment, Alexandra instructed. We want them isolated and immobile, not eliminated. With precision fire, her team disabled the cartel's remaining operational vehicles, eliminating their extraction capability and forcing them to consider alternatives that would expose them to additional prepared engagement zones. From his increasingly vulnerable command position, Ortiz assessed their deteriorating tactical situation with growing alarm. Half his force was effectively neutralized, disoriented, disabled, or pinned down by precisely targeted fire that seemed to anticipate every attempted movement or rally point. We need extraction, his tactical advisor urged. This operation is compromised beyond recovery. Ortiz studied the topographical display of the terrain, searching for options that wouldn't further expose his remaining operators. Who are we facing? This isn't civilian resistance or local law enforcement. before his advisor could respond. Their position came under precise fire, not targeting personnel, but systematically disabling their remaining communication equipment and vehicle systems. The professional restraint demonstrated in the targeting further confirmed they were facing specialized operators rather than civilians defending property. All teams fall back to secondary extraction point, Ortiz ordered over his backup communication system. Disengagement protocol Charlie, maintain tactical withdrawal formations. The cartel operators attempted to implement their extraction protocol, moving in coordinated defensive formations designed to provide mutual coverage during retreat. Under normal circumstances against conventional opponents, such maneuvers would have been effective. Against Alexandra's team, they merely provided predictable movement patterns that could be further disrupted. They're attempting organized withdrawal to secondary extraction point, Jackson reported, tracking thermal signatures through his advanced optics. Standard tactical retreat formation, moving southwest toward the canyon access road. Alexandra analyzed their movement pattern instantly. They're heading for their backup vehicles. Rodriguez confirmed location of secondary transport. Thermal signatures indicate 2 vehicles concealed in the dry wash 2 kilometers southwest of main engagement. Zone, Rodriguez confirmed, coordinating satellite thermal imagery with ground-based sensors. Perfect, Alexandra replied with the calm confidence of an experienced commander. Dixon, prepare final containment measures at coordinates Echo 7. Jackson and Keller maintain pressure on their withdrawal route, channel them toward the prepared response zone, Dixon acknowledged, and moved quickly to implement the final phase of their counter-operation. Rather than directly engaging the retreating cartel operators, Alexandra's team maintained precisely calculated pressure that herded them toward a predetermined area where the terrain naturally channeled movement through a narrow passage. A perfect ambush location that would complete the tactical encirclement. As the cartel teams converged on their secondary extraction point, believing they were successfully executing a tactical withdrawal, they unwittingly entered exactly the position Alexandra had anticipated when planning her defensive strategy. All elements approaching final containment zone, Rodriguez confirmed, monitoring their thermal signatures converging on the narrow wash leading to their backup vehicles. Execute final response, Alexandra commanded. Dixon remotely activated his specialized containment system, a combination of non-lethal but highly effective countermeasures that simultaneously illuminated the entire area with blinding light, deployed disorienting acoustic pressure, and established a perimeter of precision-targeted suppressive fire that eliminated any possibility of further coordinated movement. The cartel operators, already stressed from the systematic dismantling of their operation, found themselves in a tactical nightmare, fully exposed, disoriented, and with no viable options for continued resistance or escape. Throw down your weapons and get on the ground, Alexandra's amplified voice carried across the containment zone in perfect Spanish. You are surrounded with no extraction options. Comply immediately or face lethal response. For professional operators trained in tactical assessment, the situation was unmistakable. They were completely outmaneuvered by opponents who had anticipated their every move and countered with superior preparation and execution. One by one, the cartel team members placed their weapons on the ground and assumed surrender positions only. Ortiz remained defiant, maintaining his command position behind the limited cover of a disabled vehicle. "Who are you?" he shouted into the darkness. You're not local ranchers or law enforcement. Alexandra approached with tactical discipline, maintaining appropriate distance and cover while keeping Ortiz in her weapon sights. Someone who understands exactly what you are. Miguel Ortiz, former Mexican Naval Infantry Special Forces, now Operations Commander for Águilas Negras Northern Territory Expansion. The precision of her identification visibly shook Ortiz's professional composure. CIA, DEA Special Operations? Just a property owner protecting her land, Alexandra replied, maintaining operational security despite the temptation to educate him on exactly who he had mistakenly targeted. One who knows enough about your organization to ensure this valley remains outside your territory. As Alexandra's team secured the cartel operators with tactical restraints, Rodriguez reported unexpected movement on their perimeter sensors. Vehicle approaching from the northeast. Federal observers moving to our position. Secure and maintain the prisoners, Alexandra instructed her team. I'll handle our federal visitors. The Department of Homeland Security SUV approached slowly, lights off, demonstrating the same tactical discipline that characterized all their movements. Agents Warren and Carson emerged, their posture and positioning reflecting their specialized training as they surveyed the contained cartel operators. Impressive resolution, Ms. Reyes, Warren observed with professional appreciation, making no attempt to maintain the pretense that they hadn't been monitoring the entire engagement. 22 cartel special operators neutralized without fatalities. Command structure captured intact with equipment preserved for intelligence exploitation. Alexandra maintained her civilian cover despite the obvious assessment taking place. Just defending my property, Agent Warren. Carson surveyed the restrained cartel operators with experienced appraisal. Of course, using electronic warfare countermeasures, coordinated multi-point engagement protocols, and non-lethal tactical containment techniques that happen to precisely match classified special operations procedures. Warren stepped closer, lowering his voice. Ms. Reyes, we have a situation that requires resolution. You and your team have demonstrated capabilities that match a very specific tactical profile. My organization has a professional interest in those capabilities. I'm not sure what you're implying. Alexandra maintained operational security despite the transparency of the situation. Let me be direct, Warren continued. We know who you are, or rather, who you were. Your operational signature is distinctive to those with the classification level to recognize it. The question now is how we proceed given tonight's events. Alexandra assessed her options, recognizing that these weren't standard federal agents, but specialized intelligence operators themselves. These cartel members attacked my property. I defended it with the help of friends who happen to have relevant experience. Everything on my property is legal and properly registered. Warren nodded, with understanding. Absolutely. And we're prepared to ensure the official record reflects exactly that narrative. These individuals will be processed as cartel operators apprehended during an attempted home invasion. DEA will handle their prosecution without any uncomfortable questions about the nature of your defensive capabilities. In exchange for, Alexandra asked directly, recognizing the implied transaction. A conversation, Warren replied. Not here, not now, but soon about mutual interest regarding cartel operations in this region. My organization has been tracking Águilas Negras' territorial expansion for reasons that go beyond standard border security concerns. The distant sound of helicopters drew everyone's attention to the southern sky, where aircraft running without lights were approaching rapidly. That would be our extraction team for the prisoners, Carson explained. Black site detention, comprehensive, debriefing, intelligence exploitation. These individuals have significant value beyond tonight's failed operation. Alexandra recognized the implications. These federal agents had substantial operational authority and resources well beyond standard law enforcement capabilities. The helicopter approaching without transponders or identification confirmed they were operating under classified protocols. Your property will be clear of all evidence by morning, Warren assured her. Official reports will document a successful interdiction of cartel operators by federal agents responding to intelligence about planned criminal activity. Your involvement will be minimized to appropriate self-defense measures. And my team? Alexandra asked, her priority remaining the security of her former unit members. Never officially present, Warren confirmed. Their identities and involvement remain completely outside any documentation. As the helicopters landed in the clearing where the cartel operators had been contained, specialized teams in unmarked tactical gear emerged to take custody of the prisoners. Their equipment, communication protocols, and operational discipline further confirmed Alexandra's assessment. These were specialized intelligence community assets rather than standard law enforcement. My card has a secure contact protocol, Warren reminded Alexandra as the prisoners were efficiently processed for transport. We'll be in touch within 48 hours to continue our discussion. Until then, consider this situation officially resolved. As the federal teams completed their extraction operation with remarkable efficiency, Alexandra rejoined her team at the command center beneath her house. The systematic removal of all evidence of the night's engagement demonstrated professional thoroughness that matched their own operational standards. Federal intelligence assets, definitely, Jackson assessed, having observed their procedures. Specialized unit operating under classified authorization. Their equipment and protocols suggest direct national command authority rather than standard agency operations. Rodriguez checked his Border Patrol connections for any official documentation of the night's events. They're already implementing their cover story. Official channels show a successful multi-agency operation intercepting cartel operators based on intelligence about planned criminal activities. No mention of civilian involvement or property defense. They're good, Keller noted with professional appreciation. Comprehensive evidence management, complete operational security, seamless extraction protocols. Reminds me of our support elements during classified deployments. Alexandra considered the implications of the federal team's interest. They recognized our operational signature. That means they have access to classified mission profiles and the expertise to match tactical patterns to specific units. Intelligence community counterterrorism assets, Jackson suggested. The only ones with both the classification level and specialized knowledge to identify former Delta operators by their tactical methodologies. The question is what they want, Dixon added, securing their equipment with practiced efficiency. Federal intelligence assets don't offer cleanup and cover stories without expecting significant return on investment. Alexandra reviewed Warren's carefully worded approach. They're running an operation against Águilas Negras that goes beyond standard counter-narcotics or border security. Something classified that intersects with our disruption of the cartel's territorial expansion. Will you meet with them? Jackson asked. Alexandra considered the question with tactical precision. Yes, but carefully. We need to understand their actual objective and ensure it doesn't compromise our security or civilian covers. As dawn approached, the federal teams completed their extraction operation with remarkable efficiency. The only evidence remaining of the night's engagement was the damaged gate at Alexandra's property entrance and a few tire tracks across her front yard, consistent with the official story of federal agents responding to intelligence about planned criminal activity. Sheriff Patterson's vehicle appeared on the horizon just as the morning sun crested the eastern mountains. His arrival was expected. The federal operation would have generated enough official communication to warrant local law enforcement follow-up, even if that follow-up was merely procedural. Alexandra met him on her porch, coffee in hand, presenting the image of a civilian property owner awakened by unexpected law enforcement activity near her ranch. Quite the operation last night, Patterson observed, accepting the offered coffee. Federal task force apprehending cartel operators planning criminal activities in the area. According to the official notifications I received at 4 a.m. I heard helicopters, Alexandra confirmed with deliberate casualness. Quite a commotion for our quiet valley. Patterson surveyed her property with experienced assessment, noting the precisely aligned tire tracks that military vehicles typically leave, the professional spacing of foot patterns that indicated tactical team movements, and the complete absence of shell casings or other evidence that would normally remain after such an operation. Remarkably thorough federal response, he noted, almost like they had advanced knowledge and precisely prepared extraction protocols. Alexandra maintained her cover story while recognizing the sheriff's implied questions. Good to know federal agencies are paying attention to cartel movements in our area. Interesting timing, Patterson continued, his experienced law enforcement instincts evident in his careful observations. Just 24 hours after you single-handedly repelled a cartel incursion, a specialized federal unit conducts a precision operation capturing the same cartel's entire special operations team. Fortunate coincidence, Alexandra offered with deliberate neutrality. Patterson studied her with the measured assessment of someone who had spent decades reading people. Ms. Reyes, I've been sheriff in this county for 17 years. Before that, I was a Texas Ranger specializing in border operations. I know when I'm looking at a professionally managed scene rather than a standard law enforcement response. He gestured toward the precisely arranged evidence of federal presence, the carefully positioned tire tracks, the deliberately visible boot prints that matched standard federal tactical team patterns, the conspicuous absence of typical operational debris. This was staged to establish an official narrative, Patterson stated, rather than asked. A narrative that protects someone's involvement while providing a clean explanation for last night's activities. Alexandra recognized that maintaining complete denial would only damage her credibility with this experienced law enforcement professional. Sheriff, sometimes it's better not to look too closely at fortunate outcomes. The cartel threat to this valley has been neutralized, their personnel removed, their operation dismantled. Patterson nodded slowly, accepting the implicit confirmation of his assessment. Those federal agents who visited you yesterday, they weren't standard Department of Homeland Security, were they? Their credentials checked out, Alexandra replied carefully. I'm sure they did. The sheriff finished his coffee and stood. Ms. Reyes, I don't know who you really are or who your visitors really represent. What I do know is that my county is safer today than it was yesterday, and sometimes that's enough for a local sheriff to accept. As Patterson prepared to leave, he paused with one final observation. The Federal After-Action Report mentions specialized operator tactics used by the cartel team, said they were former Mexican special forces requiring advanced countermeasures. Interesting that such professionals would be so thoroughly outmaneuvered on unfamiliar terrain at night. Alexandra offered no response beyond a neutral acknowledgement of his comment. Whoever planned and executed that counter-operation understands asymmetric warfare at an extraordinary level, Patterson concluded, almost like they had years of experience neutralizing hostile forces in unfamiliar territory with minimal personnel. After the sheriff departed, Alexandra rejoined her team for a final operational assessment. The systematic dismantling of the cartel threat had been completed with remarkable efficiency, but new considerations had emerged with the federal intelligence community's interest in their capabilities. "We've achieved our primary objective," Alexandra confirmed. "The cartel's northern expansion has been disrupted, their special operations team neutralized, and their leadership now faces significant internal challenges. Not to mention federal intelligence exploitation of their captured operators," Jackson added. "The intelligence value of those prisoners will compromise cartel operations across multiple states." Rodriguez monitored communications channels for any indication of continued cartel presence or federal activity. Border Patrol reports increased security at all crossing points within 200 miles. Águilas Negras leadership has gone silent, suggesting they're implementing emergency security protocols. "They won't attempt another direct action here," Keller assessed with professional confidence. "The loss of an entire special operations team represents catastrophic operational failure. They'll need months to rebuild that capability, and the leadership will be focused on identifying responsibility for the failure rather than continuing territorial expansion." Dixon secured the last of their specialized equipment, preparing it for transport. "What about our federal observers? They clearly recognized our operational signature and have enough clearance to identify former Delta operators." Alexandra considered this complication with strategic assessment. They're running a classified operation against the cartel that goes beyond standard counter-narcotics work, something that warranted deploying intelligence community assets rather than standard law. "Enforcement, will you meet with them?" Jackson asked directly. "Yes, but carefully," Alexandra decided. "Their resources and capabilities represent both potential complication and potential advantage. We need to understand their actual objectives before determining how to proceed." As the morning progressed, Alexandra's team began their planned dispersal. Unlike conventional military units that deployed and returned together, special operations teams understood the security value of independent movement. Each team member had arrived separately, using different routes and transport methods. They would depart the same way, leaving no pattern that could be tracked or identified. Jackson secured his communications equipment and prepared for departure first. "I have a private security consultation in Houston that provides perfect cover. For my presence in Texas, my documented movements will show standard business travel with no connection to this location. My Border Patrol rotation starts tomorrow in El Paso," Rodriguez confirmed. "Official duty assignment covers my presence in the region without raising questions." Keller and Dixon finalized their equipment preparations, ensuring nothing would connect them to the operation or location if they were questioned or surveilled during their return journeys. Remember our standard protocols, Alexandra reminded them, though these veteran operators needed no such instruction. No communication about operational details through any electronic means. No discussion of our activities with anyone outside. The team, maintain your established covers and normal routine patterns. As they prepared to depart, the professional efficiency of their operation shifted briefly, allowing the personal connections formed through years of shared danger to surface. These weren't merely tactical operators who had executed a mission together. They were a team who had repeatedly trusted each other with their lives across multiple continents and countless high-risk operations. "Stay safe," Jackson told Alexandra with genuine concern. "These federal intelligence types play complicated games. Don't meet with them alone." "I know their protocols," she assured him. "I'll take appropriate precautions." Rodriguez embraced her briefly. "My Border Patrol resources remain available if you need additional intelligence or monitoring. One message through our secure channel brings whatever support you require." Keller and Dixon offered similar assurances of continued availability if needed, the team's loyalty transcending their official separation years ago. Despite returning to their civilian lives and professional covers, the bond formed through shared combat experience remained undiminished. One by one, they departed using different routes and timing to ensure no pattern could be observed by possible surveillance. Alexandra's property returned to its appearance as an isolated ranch, with no visible evidence of the specialized team that had operated there or the sophisticated counter-cartel operation they had executed. By midday, Alexandra had completed a comprehensive security sweep of her property, removing any remaining technical indicators of the night's activities. Ranger followed faithfully at her heels as she walked the perimeter, his alert presence a continuing part of her security protocols rather than merely a companion. The secure satellite phone in her command center activated with an encrypted message from her Border Patrol contact, Águilas Negras leadership in emergency conclave. Castellanos under pressure from cartel principals. Internal purge expected as blame for operational failure is assigned. The intelligence confirmed her tactical assessment. The cartel had suffered a significant strategic defeat that would force them to focus inward on security and leadership challenges rather than continuing territorial expansion. The immediate threat to the valley and its residents had been neutralized effectively. Her regular cell phone rang with an incoming call from Sarah Thornton, her neighbor who had warned her about the cartel's activities days earlier. "Alexandra, have you heard the news?" Sarah's voice carried genuine excitement. "Federal agents captured an entire cartel team last night. It's all over local radio, and the sheriff's department is confirming the operation." "I heard helicopters," Alexandra confirmed, maintaining her civilian cover even with neighbors. "Quite a commotion for our quiet valley." "They're saying it was a special anti-cartel task force that's been tracking their movements for months. Finally caught them planning some major operation in our area." "Good to know federal agencies are paying attention to what happens out here," Alexandra replied, carefully reinforcing the official narrative that had been established. "People are saying this means the cartel's given up on moving into our valley. The Henderson place already has a legitimate buyer looking at it, an actual cattle operation from Fort Stockton." The normalization of community activities represented the true success of their operation, not just neutralizing the cartel threat, but restoring the natural patterns of civilian life that had been disrupted by criminal encroachment. After completing Her security protocols, Alexandra reviewed her tactical options regarding the federal intelligence operatives who had demonstrated clear interest in her background and capabilities. Their resources and operational authority represented a potential complication if mishandled, but also a potential asset if properly leveraged. The secure contact protocol on Warren's card involved a complex verification system that further confirmed her assessment. These weren't standard federal agents, but specialized intelligence community assets operating under classified authorization. The communication method incorporated counter-surveillance measures and identity verification protocols, consistent with covert intelligence operations rather than standard law enforcement procedures. Alexandra initiated the contact sequence, implementing her own security measures to ensure the meeting would occur under conditions that protected her operational security and provided tactical advantages if the situation deteriorated. Her message specified a meeting location that appeared to be a neutral public space, but which she had already reconnoitered for optimal situational awareness and multiple exit options. Within an hour, she received confirmation through the secure protocol, a meeting scheduled for the following day at her specified location. The response included recognition codes that matched established intelligence community practices, further confirming the federal team's specialized nature. As evening approached, Alexandra sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the Davis, mountains in gold and crimson. Ranger lay at her feet, his alertness never fully diminished despite the reduction in immediate threat conditions. The peaceful scene contrasted sharply with the sophisticated counter-cartel operation that had occurred hours earlier on the same property. Her satellite phone activated with an encrypted message from Rodriguez. Federal database access confirms. Warren and Carson, operating under classified program designation. Authorization codes match specialized counter-terrorism unit with cross-border operational authority. Legitimate intelligence community assets, not rogue operators. The confirmation aligned with her assessment based on their equipment, protocols, and operational discipline. These federal agents represented a specialized intelligence unit rather than standard law enforcement. Professionals with the clearance, level and operational experience to recognize former Delta operators by their tactical signature. Alexandra considered the implications as darkness fell across her property. The immediate cartel threat had been neutralized. The valley's residents could return to normal activities without fear of criminal encroachment, and her team had dispersed safely to their established covers. Only the federal intelligence interest remained as an unresolved variable requiring careful management. Tomorrow's meeting would determine whether that interest represented an opportunity or a threat. Either way, Alexandra was prepared to protect her carefully constructed civilian life and the operational security of her former team members. She had faced more dangerous and complex challenges during her years in Delta Force, navigating political complexities in failed states while executing high-risk missions with minimal support. A meeting with federal intelligence operatives on American soil represented a manageable tactical problem in comparison. She would approach it with the same strategic assessment, situational awareness, and operational discipline that had made her one of the most effective operators in Delta Force history. As stars appeared in the clear mountain sky, Alexandra allowed herself a rare moment of reflection on the path that had brought her to this place. From specialized military training through classified combat deployments to her current life defending a remote Texas valley from cartel expansion, each phase had been shaped by her exceptional capabilities and unwavering commitment to protecting others from threats they often couldn't perceive until too late. The morning sun cast long shadows across the town of Alpine as Alexandra arrived for her meeting with the federal intelligence operatives. She had selected this location carefully, a small cafe on the main street that offered multiple tactical advantages disguised as ordinary features. The corner position provided visibility in all directions. The multiple exits allowed for rapid departure if necessary, and the public setting discouraged any aggressive action while permitting private conversation. Alexandra arrived 30 minutes early, implementing standard counter-surveillance protocols to verify she wasn't being monitored or followed. She performed a casual but comprehensive assessment of the surroundings, identifying all security cameras, noting vehicle patterns, and establishing baseline civilian movement for later anomaly detection. Nothing indicated unusual surveillance or security presence beyond what would be expected for a federal intelligence meeting. She selected a table that positioned her back to the wall with clear sightlines to all entrances and approaches. The tactical assessment was automatic after years of operational conditioning, identifying potential threats, planning response options, maintaining situational awareness even in apparently secure environments. Warren and Carson arrived precisely on schedule, their punctuality reflecting their professional discipline. They entered separately, using different doors in a pattern that demonstrated counter-surveillance training. Despite their casual civilian attire, their movement and positioning revealed their specialized background to Alexandra's experienced assessment. "Ms. Reyes," Warren greeted her with professional courtesy as he took a seat across from her. Carson remained standing briefly, completing his own environmental scan before joining them. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Your cleanup operation was impressively thorough," Alexandra replied, acknowledging their professional competence while establishing that she had noted the details of their operational methods. Sheriff Patterson found it educational. Warren smiled slightly at the subtle message, her recognition of both their operational efficiency and the transparency of their staged evidence. Professional courtesy between colleagues, even if unofficial. Alexandra maintained neutral expression. "I'm a civilian rancher, Agent Warren, not your colleague." "Of course," he acknowledged, respecting her maintenance of cover identity despite the mutual understanding of reality. Though civilian consultants with specialized experience often provide valuable insights to federal operations. Carson placed a small electronic device on the table between them, a sophisticated counter-surveillance tool disguised as a common phone charger. The light pattern on its surface indicated it was actively generating an electromagnetic security field that would prevent electronic eavesdropping within a 3-meter radius. "For privacy," he explained unnecessarily, the professional gesture communicating their seriousness about operational security. Warren leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Reyes, I'll be direct since we all understand the realities involved. My unit has been tracking Águilas Negras activities for the past 18 months as part of a classified national security investigation. Their operations in your area represented a significant expansion of their territorial control. But our interest goes beyond standard counter-narcotics concerns." "What specific interest does an intelligence community unit have in a drug trafficking organization? Alexandra asked, probing for information while maintaining her civilian persona. Not drug trafficking, Warren clarified. Foreign intelligence penetration using cartel infrastructure as cover and support mechanism. The clarification explained their specialized presence and operational authority. Counterintelligence operations on domestic soil required specific authorizations beyond standard law enforcement. We've identified 3 foreign intelligence services using Águilas Negras distribution networks to move personnel and equipment across the border, Carson elaborated. The cartel leadership has allowed this access in exchange for specialized training, equipment, and financial support that enhances their operational capabilities against both Mexican authorities and rival organizations. Alexandra processed this information with tactical assessment, which explains why their operators demonstrated military discipline and equipment capabilities beyond standard cartel resources. Warren nodded. Their special operations team that you encountered represented a significant investment by both the cartel leadership and their foreign partners. Former Mexican Naval Special Forces operators recruited through financial incentives and then provided specialized training by intelligence officers operating under commercial cover. And now you have the entire team in custody, Alexandra noted. A significant intelligence coup, Warren confirmed. The operational debriefing has already yielded actionable intelligence regarding foreign intelligence operations using cartel infrastructure. Information we wouldn't have obtained without their capture. Alexandra recognized the unspoken acknowledgement of her team's contribution to their intelligence operation. The systematic neutralization and capture of the cartel's entire special operations unit had provided federal intelligence with an unprecedented opportunity for information gathering. Which brings us to our current conversation, Warren continued. Your expertise in neutralizing specialized operators, demonstrated with remarkable efficiency during the past 2 engagements, represents a capability our unit could utilize in ongoing operations against similar threats. The recruitment approach was now explicit. They weren't investigating her activities, but rather assessing her potential value as an operational asset. I'm retired, Alexandra stated simply. From official military service, Carson acknowledged. But your recent activities demonstrate continued operational capabilities at an exceptional level. The tactical coordination, precision engagement protocols, and non-standard countermeasures employed against the cartel teams reflected specialized training and experience that remains highly relevant to current national security threats. Warren placed a thin folder on the table. We're not asking you to return to government service or compromise your current life. We're proposing a specialized consultant relationship that would maintain complete separation from your civilian identity while allowing your expertise to be applied to specific threat scenarios. Alexandra opened the folder, reviewing its contents with practiced efficiency. The proposal outlined a classified contractor arrangement that would engage her specialized capabilities for specific operations while maintaining rigorous separation from her public identity. The operational parameters, security protocols, and compensation structure reflected serious professional consideration rather than an improvised recruitment attempt. This arrangement would extend to your team as well, Warren added. Their operational effectiveness was equally impressive. and their specialized skills complement your leadership capabilities in ways that would benefit specific national security. Requirements: my team has established civilian lives, Alexandra replied, protective of her former operators' security and privacy. They're not looking to return to operational status. Neither were you, Carson observed, until a specific threat emerged that required your specialized capabilities. We're suggesting a similar arrangement, engagement only when unique threats align with your specific expertise, with comprehensive operational support and complete identity protection. Alexandra continued reviewing the proposal, noting the operational details that demonstrated their understanding of specialized counterterrorism operations. The security protocols, communication methods, and operational parameters reflected professional intelligence community standards rather than standard government contractor arrangements. "Why me specifically?" she asked, though she already understood. The likely answer: your operational signature during the cartel engagements matched specific mission profiles from classified operations in denied areas. Warren explained with careful precision that acknowledged classified information without explicitly confirming her background. The tactical methodology, engagement protocols, and team coordination demonstrated capabilities developed through specialized training and operational experience that uniquely qualifies you for certain current threat scenarios. The implied recognition of her Delta Force background remained unspoken, but clearly understood between professionals with appropriate clearance levels. "What specific threats are you addressing?" Alexandra asked, shifting to operational assessment rather than continued cover maintenance. The question represented a significant shift in the conversation, from maintaining her civilian persona to engaging as a professional operator evaluating a potential mission. Warren recognized the transition immediately. 3 distinct foreign intelligence networks operating through cartel infrastructure to position assets inside the United States. Not standard intelligence gathering, but preparation for potential kinetic operations against critical infrastructure and key personnel. The cartel leadership has transitioned from tolerating foreign intelligence use of their networks to active facilitation in exchange for specialized training and equipment, Carson elaborated. The team you neutralized represented the first generation of this enhanced capability, cartel operators with foreign intelligence training operating as deniable assets for both criminal and intelligence objectives. The strategic implications were significant and explained the deployment of specialized federal intelligence assets rather than standard law enforcement. Foreign intelligence services using criminal organizations as operational cover represented a sophisticated hybrid threat that standard security measures weren't designed to address. The FBI Counterintelligence Division has jurisdiction over foreign intelligence operations on U.S. soil, Alexandra noted. Why is your specialized unit involved instead? Because these operations exist in the gray zone between traditional intelligence activities and non-attributed asymmetric warfare, Warren explained. The foreign actors are using criminal organizations as proxies to maintain deniability while positioning capabilities that could be activated for objectives beyond standard intelligence gathering. Targeting what specifically? Alexandra pressed for operational details that would help her assess the legitimacy and importance of their proposed mission. Carson produced a secure tablet activating a classified briefing file that outlined identified and suspected targets. Critical infrastructure nodes, transportation systems, communication networks, and specialized research facilities. Not for immediate disruption, but positioned for potential future activation if certain geopolitical thresholds are crossed. The target list demonstrated sophisticated strategic planning beyond standard terrorism or criminal objectives. A coordinated preparation for potential asymmetric warfare capabilities that could be triggered during future conflicts or crises. Your specialized experience in identifying and neutralizing precisely this type of embedded threat capability in denied areas makes you uniquely qualified to assist our unit's operations, Warren concluded. Not as a government employee or formal operative, but as a specialized consultant engaged for specific high-value operations that match your expertise. Alexandra closed the folder, her tactical assessment complete. The threat they described was legitimate, the operational parameters professionally structured, and the security protocols appropriately rigorous. Their recognition of her specialized capabilities and careful approach to recruitment demonstrated professional intelligence tradecraft rather than improper exploitation. "I need to consider this carefully," she stated, neither accepting nor rejecting their proposal. "Of course," Warren acknowledged. "The secure communication protocol on my card remains active for your response when you've reached a decision. We're not asking for immediate commitment, but rather your consideration of specific operations where your expertise could be decisive against sophisticated threats." Part 10. Alexandra returned to her ranch that evening, considering the federal agents' proposal carefully. The threat they described aligned with her own commitment to protecting innocent people from dangers they couldn't perceive until too late. After discussing the situation with her team through secure channels, they reached consensus. They would assist with specific operations that required their unique capabilities, but maintain their civilian lives as their primary focus. 3 weeks later, Alexandra sat on her porch watching the sunset, Ranger at her feet. The valley had returned to peaceful normalcy, with local families no longer living under cartel threat. The specialized skills that had once made her Specter, the deadliest Delta Force sniper, now served a new purpose, protecting her community and country from evolving threats that few could identify or counter. The Mexican cartel had ambushed a female border veteran, never realizing she was the most lethal Delta Force sniper in history. A fatal miscalculation they wouldn't live to repeat. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible content just like this. Our next episode drops tomorrow, and you won't want to miss it.